At 7:15 a.m., the sheriff's SUV rolled up, mud splattered on the doors. Sheriff Boyd stepped out with a young deputy taking notes on a tablet. I explained everything clearly. Months of harassment, last night's break-in, the trapped intruder. The sheriff asked for the footage. He watched silently, jaw tightening slightly, but otherwise expressionless. Then came a moment. We walked toward the cellar. He knocked firmly, announced himself, told Judith to step back. The internal bolt slid with a rusty scrape. When the door swung open, Judith stumbled out like someone emerging from a cave. Mud-stained, hair stuck to her temples, eyes red and swollen, face pale as ghostlight. The moment she saw the sheriff, her mouth opened and unleashed a flood of excuses. I was protecting the community. I was just investigating. He locked me in. He's the criminal here. The sheriff raised a hand. Silence. He read out the list calmly. You're under arrest for criminal trespass, breaking and entering, destruction of property. Additional charges may follow. Judith froze. The deputy cuffed her. The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. As Judith stood beside the patrol car, disheveled and humiliated, neighbors began gathering. The woman Judith accused of running an illegal daycare. The man she reported for owning a loud dog he didn't own. The couple she'd harassed about trash bins. Others who'd stayed silent until now. They shared their complaints openly. The deputy documented everything. Judith's face fell with each new testimony. The sheriff turned to her. Intent doesn't excuse illegal behavior. You crossed every boundary. Her last bit of defiance collapsed. She cried openly as the deputy placed her in the patrol car. The neighbors watched without pity. The sheriff gave me a nod. You handled this exactly right. Then they drove away. Judith's self-declared HOA president was gone. I toured the cellar afterward. Judith had rummaged through everything. Open jars, moved bottles, mud prints on shelves. My wife's last labeled wine disturbed. I restored order slowly, carefully, while I picked up the final bottle Sarah and I ever made together. I felt her presence, soft but steady. I placed it back on the shelf. Some things endure. 3 days later, I signed formal statements. Judith faced fines, a restraining order, and possible jail time if she violated anything again. The neighborhood finally felt peaceful. That weekend, 6 neighbors joined me for a casual gathering. Food, conversation, relief. And as the sun set, I walked alone to the cellar with that last bottle of wine. I opened it gently, poured a glass, lifted it to the air. I kept my promise, Sarah. I protected what we built. The wine tasted like memory, deep, warm, everlasting. I sealed the bottle and returned it to its place. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, quiet, steady, unshakable, just like the truth. I never imagined there would come a day when I'd trap someone inside my own root cellar and wait for law enforcement to arrive. But on a cold October evening, when I spotted Judith Breener prying open the rusted lock of my family's old wine cellar, I knew the line had finally been crossed. For months, she had tormented half the neighborhood. Fake HOA notices, fabricated code violations, constant surveillance. But that night, she broke into the one place that still carried the memories of my late wife. And when the heavy oak door slammed shut behind her, I didn't reopen it. I just walked over, clipped on my own padlock, and called the sheriff. What happened during that long, stormy night finally exposed who Judith truly was. The rain started as a soft whisper that afternoon. I was in the greenhouse, checking the last tomato vines before winter, when I felt that unmistakable shift in the air, the kind that tells you a storm is coming whether you're ready or not. The sky darkened into a heavy gray blanket pressing down on the valley. The wind was restless, pushing bursts of cold air through the trees. The oak branches scraped the roof of the house like skeletal fingers. I'd lived on this land for 20 years, 15 of them with Sarah before cancer took her, and I knew every sound the property made when weather rolled in. The greenhouse door rattled on its hinges. The wind chimes Sarah hung on the porch swung between silence and frantic clattering. It was time to shut everything down for the night. Our root cellar sat about 50 yards behind the house, built into a small rise of earth by my grandfather in the 1940s. On the outside, it looked like nothing, just a thick oak door set into concrete, secured with an old iron lock worn green by age. Inside were the bottles of wine Sarah and I had made together, each labeled in her careful handwriting, each tied to a memory I could still feel. After she died, I couldn't touch them. The cellar became a place frozen in time. I should have known Judith would eventually come after it. She'd been circling my property for months like a hawk searching for prey. Letters claiming my fence was 6 inches too high. Photos of my compost been posted online with fabricated complaints. Standing at the end of my driveway, filming my vegetable beds while muttering about unregistered structures. My lawyer had already told me Judith's HOA didn't exist. Her authority was a fantasy she forced onto others. So I documented, recorded, waited. The light was fading fast when I saw a flicker near the root cellar. A sharp yellow flash that wasn't lightning. I froze halfway between the greenhouse and the back porch. Another flicker. Not natural. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app, one I installed 2 weeks earlier. The feed loaded slowly through the rain, then sharpened. There she was, Judith Breener, yellow raincoat, pry bar in hand, forcing open my cellar door. She checked over her shoulder repeatedly, jittery, guilty, but determined. I started recording immediately. I didn't confront her. My lawyer's warning echoed in my head. Do not engage. Document everything. A metallic click rang out through the yard. The lock gave way. Judith slipped inside, and the beam of her flashlight vanished into the cellar's darkness. That was my breaking point. Not anger, not fear, just a cold, heavy clarity. She had violated the one place that still held my life with Sarah. I dialed the sheriff. No signal. The storm had taken down the towers. All I could do was wait and keep her contained. The rain grew heavier, turning the yard into a shimmering gray blur. I moved behind the greenhouse, staying hidden while watching the half-open cellar door sway in the wind. Judith's flashlight beam swept across shelves with methodical precision. She opened jars, moved bottles, photographed labels. Mutters and self-righteous huffs escaped her lips. Everything she touched was a memory Sarah and I had created together. When she picked up the last bottle Sarah ever labeled, something inside me tightened. I checked my phone again. No service. Lightning strobed across the valley. Thunder cracked so close it felt like the sky split open. And then a violent gust slammed the cellar door shut. A deep, heavy thud echoed across the yard. Judith screamed inside, startled, panicked. I knew that door well. Once it closed completely, the old bolt engaged automatically. It could only be opened from outside. She was trapped. I stood there, letting the rain soak through my jacket, listening to her pound on the interior wood. Let me out. I have authority here. You can't do this. Her voice carried across the storm like a desperate siren. I said nothing. Instead, I walked to the cellar, pulled out the brass padlock I'd bought a month earlier, and secured the outside latch. Click. Final. Irrevocable. I turned and went back to the house. Her shouts faded into the storm. Inside, I hung my soaked jacket, made coffee, and checked the security footage again. The video clips showed everything clearly. Her approach, break-in, forced entry, search. Perfect evidence. The power flickered with the strengthening storm. Branches slammed against the roof. The wind howled so violently the windows shook. Somewhere outside, Judith was trapped in cold, silent darkness. Not in danger, just terrified. The cellar had ventilation, drainage, thick stone walls. She wasn't drowning. She wasn't suffocating. She was just suffering the natural consequences of her actions. Hours passed. The storm worsened into something almost biblical. Judith's voice became hoarse, cracking between sobbing and denial. She begged, threatened, cried again, and through the storm's roar, I occasionally heard the faint, desperate pounding. I didn't intervene. She had invaded my most sacred space. She could wait for the law. Close to dawn, the storm eased into a weak drizzle. The gray light crept through the windows. I checked my phone. 2 bars. I called the sheriff. This time it connected. A unit was already on the way. I looked outside. My yard was a disaster. Branches everywhere, garden flattened, a massive oak limb blocking half the driveway. And there, still locked tight, was the cellar door. I couldn't hear anything from inside.